This is now the third part of our discussion of Peter Gärdenfors's book, Conceptual Spaces. I'm again joined by Koen Frolichcs.
Hello.
And today we'll be discussing chapters 5 and 6, which deal with semantics and induction. I think Koen and my favorite topics.
Yeah, exactly.
And, so last time actually, we said like the looking forward to this part, we said I think the semantics chapter was 60 pages long and the induction chapter was 30 pages long. And I kind of wished it was the other way around. But I think having read them now, I was pretty happy that it was this way around and not the other way around, because I kind of actually enjoyed the semantics one, despite my expectations.
Okay, very good.
And I found the induction one largely confusing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe I wasn't particularly focused per se, but yeah, I didn't really take much from that, to be honest. Yeah, I guess maybe it's to say it at the beginning. I don't think this episode's going to be particularly long. I don't think either of us has a huge amount to say here.
Nope. Actually, really short.
I don't.
Yeah, no, me neither. Yeah.
So maybe this might be a thing where we just say, we read them. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Next week will be chapter 7 and 8.
Yeah. If you want some information, like, do it yourself. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I kind of expected this, and it was kind of as bad as I expected. And this is not like me shitting on the writing or anything. It's just that I find this, this is not my topic of choice.
Yeah.
And to read it in such an abstract manner, it's not semantics, right? It's like abstracting semantics into like something that you can like work with. I found incredibly hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the main problem is just that I just don't know anything about semantics. I mean, I've heard of the topic. I've probably encountered it a few times in passing, but I just don't know anything about it. So I read through the thing, and there were a few things I found kind of interesting, how now like adjectives can be like parts on a dimension or something, and nouns can be these clusters in it, and what was it, clusters?
I think so.
Yeah, or like multiple things. Like, there were a few things in there that I thought were kind of interesting, but I have no comparison or reference point, basically, when talking about semantics. For me, it's just like, this is more or less the first time I'm hearing about it in a detailed way.
Yeah.
And I just have nothing really to add other than sounds kind of logical. It seems like the whole thing, and that's, the way he puts it also, is that it's still very much at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I think his whole idea is more like, this is something that people think of this way, but I think it makes more sense to think of it this way, and it kind of fits in.
Yeah.
But it's also very much an early field, it seems to me. So it seems like a lot of stuff isn't worked out. But yeah, I just don't have much to add.
He even said so in the end, right? It's like this is me kind of throwing these ideas out there. I think at the end of chapter 5, this is not like, it's not completely thought through. It needs a lot of work still. I don't know if it has had work since 2000.
Probably.
Past 20 years, probably, yeah. But yeah, you're right. I guess what I found really difficult, what I found easier in the previous chapters was also to see it in this framework more. Like I felt like either we went back to the framework more, or I could myself put it back, in this conceptual framework. And now I felt like there were a lot of pages of, semantics, and then like a little bit like, only like 2 or 3, like when the figures came, where you're like, okay, as you just said, you put the nouns in clusters, whatever. And I found that really difficult, and it makes it so dry.
One small point I wrote down somewhere is that I really felt like whenever he started using examples, I started being engaged again. Mm-hmm. To some extent, it did feel like he used quite a lot actually, but
sure.
It's just every time I was interested, I realized like, because he's using examples here to show how something fits into something. And yeah, I mean, again, maybe for people who are really steeped into semantics, these, they're like obvious topics to talk about, and you don't really have to explain them much. The same way, like if I were to read something about cooperation, I probably wouldn't want an example for every point made, because I've probably heard them a lot before. But in this case, I hadn't.
You kind of need to be taken by the hand more, which he probably doesn't even have the space for, right? To
That's the next thing. Then it's obviously twice as long if he does that. So I don't know whether we want that either.
Do you know a favorite example of chapter 5 or 6 that he gave, or like an idea? Do you have one like that? I just have one pop in my head. That's why.
Oh, you can just say that one, then I'll have a look.
what I thought was interesting, the metaphors, like the mapping of the
Right,
metaphors,
yeah.
how you like take the structure from an existing concept and then apply it to a new thing, and that makes sense. I thought that was kind of an interesting idea, right? But that kind of also, I guess that also fits back into this Cartesian way of looking at it, kind of, right? Like the top of the mountain, the top of the social hierarchy, stuff like that. So yeah, I guess that's when I was kind of engaged against, like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, this I get again.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what I mean. That's the kind of stuff that I find interesting. And also, I think he also addresses this briefly, but at some point I did have this question of, I think he says something like that the main metaphors are spatial or something like that.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Again, like I came to this book through the spatial navigation literature.
Yeah.
And there's the same kind of question, like, do people, how should we say, like, I guess, like, did grid cells kind of first, and place cells and that kind of stuff first, kind of were they used for space, and then you can use them for other stuff also? Or is it this generic thing that was from the beginning generic? And I guess he kind of slightly alludes to this also by saying, like, the spatial ones seem to be a bit more fundamental maybe, but...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thought it was interesting as well, right? Yeah, it's like a little nod towards, like, we were spatial beings first and then the rest came, kind of, right? Or like,
yeah, I guess because if you look at, but like, I mean, I guess if you look at, take like the simplest organisms, the first thing they can do is move towards and away from just something, right?
Yeah, you're
right. So I guess movement is, and space is kind of I think, I don't know, maybe there's probably like, there's probably some bacteria that do something else first, but
sure.
I don't know. Yeah, I think, I don't know, the one point I wrote down about this part, is kind of one question I've had in the beginning. I think I've wanted to ask it before, but I don't think we got to it. And that he kind of alludes to here also, is that he cites Putnam, whoever that is, who has this example around his confusion or his lack of knowledge about the difference between elms and beeches. That he basically, there's two types of trees, and he's like, I don't know which is which. Like, for me, it's all the same, basically. And he uses that as some sort of, I can't remember exactly, but some example of why X or Y doesn't work or whatever. Yeah. And but the one thing that I find interesting here that relates to something I was interested in is just generally this question of, and I think this is probably a really interesting empirical question also, it's just kind of like, how do you represent, let's forget about semantics and that kind of stuff for now. Just go back to the general idea of the concepts made up of several dimensions. Like, how do you represent something where, or basically, how do you represent something where you don't know what a value on a dimension is? For example, I don't know. Let's say I say, hey, there's this person, my friend Mike.
Yeah. And
you know nothing about this person. I mean, I don't know. Right, so you have all these dimensions, you have no information. Do you just go with a prototype? Do you actually not represent any other information than the name and the gender right now? Or do you kind of, I was just, so that's kind of, I guess one question is kind of like, how is something represented if you have very little information about it, but there's lots of variables that are relevant usually. Mm-hmm. And the other is basically like, how do you, because, that's kind of with his elms and beeches is, there's all sorts of differences. He just doesn't know what they are, basically.
Yeah.
And the other kind of related point to this is that, I guess kind of when you have to make a decision, when you process some, let's say again, a person or something, and there's just lots of variables and dimensions that aren't relevant.
Yeah.
Are those processed the entire time, or do you kind of just lose the irrelevant ones? So depending on context, you just pick out the dimensions that seem most relevant.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like you have in some sense this representation, like the complete representation of something.
Yeah.
That might, in your case, not even be complete because you lack information. But then also when you use it, like, is it like you have like this nucleus or something of, you've kind of saved, let's say, using the computer metaphor, like you've saved lots of information about something, and then you only like pick out the thing that's relevant. You pull out certain information. I don't know. That's just the one thing in here that I thought like that relates to something I'm actually really interested in knowing what it is.
Yeah. No, it is really interesting, and I think there's probably like several answers that make sense or that could be tested, right, empirically. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm asking very general questions, so there's
Yeah.
probably lots of different answers for it.
Yeah, no, but it is interesting. I think Peter probably would say like it's like context dependent, right? Like that's kind of
Yeah.
like also like what dimensions you focus on, and also like how you start representing this person, right? Like let's say you would always use a prototype, but then even like if I think about like a friend of yours, could be different prototypes. Right? Do I look at you as Ben, my colleague, right? Then then Mike is probably going to be...
in which context do I mention this person?
Exactly, yeah. And like, yeah, exactly. And like, where are you in my context, right? Are you like, a very good friend or like an acquaintance, whatever, like, right?
Yeah,
so I guess that's probably it.
But I feel like that is something that's like, it also kind of relates, I guess, like when I'm interested in like how people make decisions in social context, there is this kind of question of which information... this is the one thing I think about a fair bit, or want to in the future more. What information do people use in a given situation? And then I guess the question here that I'm kind of asking in how it's represented when this information has to be used is maybe more a question of like biological implementation. And I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I guess there's just a bunch of things.
It's a very broad thing you brought up now. But I think it's a very interesting question. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like this example he gives with the color red, right? Red book, red wine, red hair. Like that's kind of like, I guess, it feels a little bit related to what you're saying, but I don't know how to like. I guess that's just a context thing. I guess it's not that important.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, actually, that was a thing I found quite interesting. This kind of like how people differentiate colors. Like first you have black and white, then you add red or something. What was it? There was this kind of like order in which people basically like at first you go like you just differentiate them based on brightness or something, and then you kind of basically you only need the smaller colors once the larger categories don't work.
Yeah.
Like if you have I can't remember exactly what the example would be now.
Lilac, or how do you pronounce it?
Lilac? But yeah,
lilac. Okay.
I mean, I think, not sure. But I just found it interesting that you have this like clear hierarchy in terms of like more or less in which order people start using certain words, which makes complete sense, right? That you wouldn't, if you have a new species of animal, you wouldn't go like immediately down to like this is precisely the color of the thing. You say like it's a kind of red bird kind of.
Yeah. It's like a dog with wings.
Exactly, and reddish. Yeah. I mean, one related thing here that's kind of random, but so there's this thing I heard that basically until fairly recently the color orange didn't exist in German or English or whatever, I can't remember. But you know that the idea that basically orange is one of the few colors that's named after the actual fruit. And since I think the fruit just didn't exist in, I don't know whether it's just like German or English countries or in Europe or something like that until a few hundred years ago. But that, for example, like in, I can only think of German examples now, the bird species, oh God, let me look up the English name for this. So it's just called the European robin. In German is called, actually you can also call it in English robin redbreast.
Okay.
And,
sure.
Rotkehlchen in German. And the thing is, it's obviously not a red chest; it's orange.
Oh, really? I always thought they were red. Okay.
No, it's orange, and there's apparently quite a lot of things like that in English and German where people say it's red, but actually it's more orange. It's just they didn't really have the color then. So I wondered to some extent whether, because red was really early in the hierarchy. That the people listed. So I wonder to what extent that depends on the language you use and the words for colors you have in them.
Makes sense.
But anyway, I still like the general kind of. I thought it was interesting that it would be kind of so clear in a way.
Actually, what I was thinking is that's probably also why there's so much interest in semantics and stuff like that, because that's kind of. I'm not saying this is easy to study, but that like before, like, like neuroimaging techniques, whatever, this was a way of really looking into cognition, right? Like what words do kids start? Like that, you had an example like kids first called things dogs and not animals.
Oh yeah, I think they had
Animal is like too broad of a category to understand initially. Or
yeah, there was some like, it's kind of interesting, wasn't it?
I have to admit, because I always like shit on people when they're like, language is so interesting. It's like, fuck up. But it is. Yeah, and actually, like, and then from a developmental perspective, like it's very like it is like a window into cognition, right? Which is
right, and how they learn about rules and that kind of stuff when children do grammatical errors that are actually correct, fight it or something like that. That's it's completely correct reasoning, but it's just incorrect practically. But it's funny. I mean, we I always say language is so boring, but then when you read about it, it's like, oh, this is really cool.
No, it definitely has some very interesting things. And I was thinking, like, this is kind of how, I'm not sure if this is completely true, but kind of like the earlier studies into cognition, right? That was, I think, a lot of language based, and I think it makes sense, right? Because it's it's a good way of studying it, or like at least like initial predictions.
Definitely. Do you have anything else? I think maybe we should just stop whilst we're still positive about language.
Exactly.
Do you have anything else to say about chapter 5?
No, I think that was it for chapter 5.
Okay, cool. Let's shit on chapter 6 then. No, I'm still going to be kind. But I have to admit, I mean, I don't know, I read this today and maybe I just wasn't particularly structured or whatever, but I found it slightly hard to follow exactly what he was trying to say and what the point of the whole chapter was. I mean, he did clearly say in the beginning what the point was, but I'm just not sure whether, I don't know. Yeah, I just somehow thought this was going to be a lot more interesting than I ended up finding it.
Yeah. This was like, because chapter 5, I knew I was going to, it was probably going to be a struggle. Yeah. Chapter 6, I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of like, the little dessert after it. But I found it harder than chapter 5 even.
Yeah, me too.
I guess,
a lot actually,
Yeah.
I mean, I have...
End.
No. Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, this one is also then just half the length. So here I basically only have 2 points, I guess, to make, which are not exactly critical, but not exactly positive either.
Okay.
One is that, so I had this thought before so he talks about these, what they're called, logical positivists, whatever, people who use the symbolic level and then apply, logical reasoning to it and how things work.
Yeah.
And it just always seems to me like people wasting their time on something that's obviously not working. It just seems so silly. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, it just seems like people just putting so much effort and thought into a framework that just doesn't seem to be going in the right direction.
Yeah, like quit now, guys. Before you get in too deep. Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I feel like I'm not qualified to judge.
I mean,
these people.
I guess I'm not qualified either. But I guess the point is more that trying to use strict logical rules to explain at the symbolic level how people think just seems slightly.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Like at the very best, it's a very incomplete picture of the whole thing. It seems to me.
Yeah,
and to some extent, I mean, I haven't thought this, through, obviously. I mean, I had something similar in the beginning when I heard about the whole Homo economicus in the kind of economics rationality research, where people, psychologists criticize economists because they create this supposedly rational man and then say like, if this and this is the case, then people will behave according to these rationality rules and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I've now realized actually there is a lot of point to that if you are aware of the kind of limitations of it.
Sure.
I'm not entirely sure whether that applies here, but I don't know. I just kept having that thought when, not only this chapter, but several times in the book.
It is symbolic people. Yeah.
Yeah,
it could be. Yeah, I mean, for me, I then wonder, like, or is it me just not understanding it, right? Like, do I not understand the depth of their reasoning? Maybe sometimes, I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway, so that was one point, and the second point is so he talks quite a bit about the kind of analogy between humans and scientists in this one. So how like humans reason about things in general and how scientists do it.
Yeah,
and while I find that stuff kind of interesting, I'm always slightly hesitant to accept when scientists think that people act like scientists. I'm not entirely sure what my problem here is, but I had it the same way when I was studying predictive coding for my master's thesis, where they basically say like, hey, like perception doesn't work in this passive way, but instead people kind of create hypotheses and they test them through perception.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, you're just, I don't know exactly what it is, but like whenever a scientific theory matches up too closely to what the person is doing in their day-to-day life, it just seems like it's not the correct theory.
There's this theory, like, because I felt like that's a little bit more of an older idea, even, right? Like earlier psychology, right? Is that humans are rational, also that, humans are more rational than we think they are right now.
That is older.
Yeah. Like this cognitive miser theory then kind of came by Fiske and someone.
I don't know.
Like kind of that humans kind of like more like, like kind of based on the work by Kahneman and Tversky, like, the humans use heuristics way more, stuff like that, which I think is, intuitively seems more, from my own day-to-day heuristics use. No, it just seems like a more, I guess it's not really what you're talking about. Or like it's a little bit.
It's more related to the previous point.
Yeah.
It seems to me, yeah.
The book drew me off. I blame it.
It's fine. Yeah, we said this was going to be a short one. It's already almost 25 minutes. So
we talked too much.
We have apparently more to say than we thought we did, or we talk more than we have to say. I'm not entirely sure which one.
I think it's
probably both.
It's definitely too bad.
Yeah, one of them definitely, the other maybe. I'm not going to say which is which.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think, and I have to admit, I think for chapters, that's also it for chapter 6 for me, because, that the one thing is where he talks about these artificial neural networks, how they kind of like, I kind of got lost there as well. I don't think these figures are very helpful.
I don't know. I'm just not sure I knew exactly what he was doing. Yeah, that was, I think, more the problem. Okay. I think the figures are probably useful once they're put properly into context. But I agree, this was something I found slightly... Yeah, I read through it, and at some point it's been like, I'm not sure I need to really go over this again so I understand it properly. Yeah. Maybe it makes more sense if you look at it properly. But I kind of read through it and thought like, I'm not, what is he doing? Whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Same.
Yeah. Okay.
So one quick look into the future. What do we have?
Right. So we have the rest now,
which is 30 pages in total, I think. Right. 33 to
So
63.
it's chapters 7 and 8, which are about computational aspects and In Chase of Space.
Oh, that's a good title.
Which I guess is kind of his summary. So I guess next time is going to be those two. It's, as Koen said, it's only 30 pages exactly. And I guess we're going to have maybe a bit of a general discussion also.
Yeah, sure.
And kind of see what we took from the book, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I guess that's it.
TTYL.
See you again next week. Koen is doing a peace sign for those who can't see in this audio podcast that he's doing it. But you should just...
Yeah.